James Roguski is an author, researcher, activist, and natural health advocate. He specializes in researching highly complex issues and translating data into simple language that is easily understood to facilitate action. Mr. Roguski's Substack has been a source of information for a number of my own weekly news segments on the Ironwood Report. James and I have sometimes been in the same meetings with other freedom leaders. We're both contributors to the World Council for Health, and we're both doing everything we can to make the truth accessible to as many people as possible. Recently, I reached out to James with a request for an interview. His Substack makes it clear he is knowledgeable on a wide range of subjects in regards to the attempted globalist takeover of our rights and freedoms. But James turned the tables on me and instead invited me to be interviewed by him. In this interview, James asks for my bird's eye view of the globalist strategy. What are they really doing? What are they likely to do? And most importantly, what can we all do to stop them?
I came across you a number of times, and I got a chance to listen to you express your view of the situation, of at least your view of the world as you see it, what's going on. And I was intrigued enough to want to set this up to have a discussion with you about it. I just really want to give you a platform and give you the opportunity to say what you think is important to be said. And I want to listen, and then we'll have a little bit of a conversation about it.
Well, thank you very much, James. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As you say, you and I have met each other a number of times in various meetings of freedom leaders that are getting together to try to figure out how we're going to fight these globalists. Folks, most of you, I'm sure, are Americans. Since you're watching, James, you see my Canadian flag behind me. I am indeed a Canadian. But as James points out, this is a global problem. This is not something where we can afford to be geocentric in our thinking. We can't just look at Canada. We can't just look at the US. We have to pay attention to what's going on around the world, because that's what they want. They want a one world order. And if you listen to some of the comments at the recent meeting in Davos, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. Several of the people there used that term, world order, one world order, world government. They're getting quite out in the open with what their plans are. And what that means for all of us is a loss of our freedoms. Now, let's talk about this international health treaty. And you've been talking about this on your Substack. And it's not just they're removing this clause for, in fact, I think I've got it myself, full respect for the dignity, human rights, and fundamental freedoms. A child can see through what that means, but we have to understand the whole tactic that's going on here with this international health treaty. And that's when they get all these nations to sign on with it. Because what's happened in Canada, what's happened in the US with the lockdowns, forced vaccinations, but certainly coerced vaccinations and mask mandates and all of that crap, which is a complete violation of our rights. And for your American viewers, we have a constitution too. We have a Bill of Rights. We have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's being violated left, right, and center, just like your Bill of Rights is. We want to hold these politicians accountable for what they've done, and we're trying to. And we are starting to get some of them into court. We've had some victories here in Canada already. Hopefully, we're going to see a lot more. But what the globalists are doing with this is they're moving the decision-making offshore. All these countries that sign up to this international health treaty, they're giving up their sovereignty, and it's being done with a very specific purpose. And that is so that when the international or when the WHO comes along and mandates a lockdown or mandates vaccinations or whatever, because basically this treaty is going to give them the authority to do anything they want, whenever they want, the politicians who are the henchmen for this could throw their hands up and say, well, it wasn't me. I had to follow the health treaty. So who do you go after? Who do you haul into court? Now it has to go to an international criminal court if you want to hold these people accountable for what's being done. And this is why countries like the US, like Canada, we have to wake up and refuse to sign on with this and understand the degree to which we're giving up our autonomy. And not just that, but indemnifying the criminals against any kind of prosecution for their actions. So let's paint a picture of where they're trying to go with all of this. What do they want? Well, let's start at the basics. These people, as most of you know, they're psychopaths, they're sociopaths. But what's the difference? And it's important to understand the difference. And fortunately, years ago, I studied abnormal psychology on my own, out of my own interest. And it started there. It started with that idea of we throw those terms around interchangeably, but what do they actually mean? And so I discovered the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. And it's important to understand this because the upper echelons of this thing, it's all composed of psychopaths and sociopaths. And when you understand what these things are, you have an easier time getting your head around the way they think. Some important differences. A psychopath is born. A sociopath is made. Psychopaths actually have something physically wrong with their brain. Some of the structures in their brain that are responsible for love, empathy, they're underdeveloped, they're malformed. These people don't feel those emotions. Now, many of them are capable of understanding them and using them against other people, but they don't feel them themselves. Now, a sociopath does feel those things, but typically because they spent a lot of their lives using, and so what you get is this upper echelon of psychopaths at the top, the Schwabs, the Gates, a whole bunch of these people that we could rattle off the names of, but you guys know who they are. And they're the leaders up here, and they're all psychopaths. They have no conscience whatsoever. Now, the sociopaths, which are a thicker layer, they're riding on their coattails. These are like the people in government. A lot of people ask, is Justin Trudeau a psychopath? Well, technically, no, he's a sociopath. I've interviewed his brother, his half-brother, Kyle Kemper, and I know something about his childhood. And so I can tell you from his younger days, no, he's not a psychopath, but he is a sociopath, which means he really doesn't care that much anymore how much harm he's causing as long as he benefits. I couldn't speak to Biden because the problem is he's so addled these days, who God knows if there's anything going through his head other than what's being spoken into his earpiece for him. The other way to think of them, though, is, and this is also important, think of a sociopath as an arrested development teenager. What do teenagers want? Well, they want control. They're resentful that other people get to tell them what to do, that adults in their lives do tell them. And a lot of them, especially boys, and boys, by the way, become psychopaths and sociopaths at a much higher rate than women do. So they're resentful. They want control. They want to be able to force other people to do what they want. And then you got the psychopaths. They have a God complex. Not only do they have no empathy, but they genuinely believe they're better than the rest of us and that they should be the ones in charge. And because they have no empathy, they can look down on all of us and they don't see people. They see cattle. They see a cash crop. These are the sorts of people who could throw a baby off a cliff and feel nothing. It's hard for us to get our heads around that, most of us. Thankfully, it's good that it's hard for us to get our heads around that, but that's what these people are. I tell you all of this so you can understand the extent to which they are willing to go. They have no morals. They have no empathy. And then you've got, the sociopaths underneath who may have some, but typically a sociopath only expresses those feelings for people they're close to. They don't care about anybody else. And so you get these psychopaths who rise to the top. And by the way, for example, it's an interesting statistic. While it's estimated that psychopaths might be at most 2% of the general population.
Which is frightening.
But you also have to keep in mind that a lot of them are called functional psychopaths. They've come to understand that the best way to get what they want is to play the social game. The harm that they do is quite limited. They're not the sorts of people who turn into a Klaus Schwab or a Bill Gates. So fortunately, those ones are minimal. Among the general population, it's estimated that psychopaths, might be 2%. But among CEOs of major corporations, it's more like 20%. And who are the globalists? Mm-hmm. They're the CEOs of major corporations. And many of them, they're even, interestingly enough, self-aware psychopaths who know they're psychopaths and they see it as a good thing because they're not crippled by emotion like the rest of us are.